everybody. Welcome to another episode of God is Not a Theory with Ken Fish. I'm your host, Grant Pemberton, and on today's episode, we have part two. We talked about it. I didn't believe it was going to happen as quickly as this, so I'm very excited. We have Dane Yarbrough back with us. I heard so many great things from so many people about our time with Dane, and so we're very much looking forward to spending some more time with him as well. So Ken, Dane, thanks so much, and welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
Yep, me too. It's good to be here. So Dane, I decided to have you back on the show both because I love you a lot, and we've had a friendship that goes back into the last millennium, but also because we got a lot of really positive feedback about the talk that we had. I don't know when it was, about a month ago, I guess, and so I thought, well, let's just do a part two because apparently people can't get enough of Dane and Ken. So that's what we're going to do here today. What have you been up to? What have you been up to since we last talked? I'd seen you just before we did that last recording.
I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm trying to find a way to circle my wagons. And I'm kind of like that old dog that's looking how to figure out a way to lay down. I am ready to retire from my business now and settle in and do other things. And so right now I'm just working like a madman. This is our heavy season in what we do. And so I'm doing that. And then Renee and I are planning, we had this long discussion about a week and a half ago about starting a citywide Bible study at the end of May called The Seekers. And because we have this great burden for those who love God but are unchurched, and there's just 80% of the population, I think, is that group that they either grew up in church or they've been exposed to church, but for whatever reason, and I'm not going to go into all that, but for some reason they just find themselves unchurched. You know, it's pretty simple. It's pretty easy to do that. It doesn't take but about 3 or 4 weeks, and then you start drifting. And once you start drifting, it's kind of like being in the ocean on a float. You know, you just lay back and close your eyes. Before you know it, you don't even know where you are. You've drifted so far. So that's our plan, to go out and reach out to those kind of people. So that's my thought process.
All right. So I love that. Things that what was all that noise just then? What was that? Who knows? Okay. I got a couple things that you said that just, I want to unpack them. The first one is that you are looking to, like a dog looking to lie down, you're circling and you want to get out of your business. What is your business? Because when we talked with you last time, everyone knows that you knew John Wimber, traveled with him. You were a pastor in Dallas, Texas. You're now living in East Texas, but I think it's really helpful for people to understand that it's possible to be a fully engaged Christian without being quote unquote reverend or in the ministry, as we say. So what is it that you do? How do you earn your living? Where does your daily bread come from?
Well, as you well know, Ken, in 2008, I moved down here and I had empty pockets, and it was kind of tough. But anyway, make the long story short, I just started and did what I did when I was a kid growing up. You know, one of the things that always has amazed me is how people complain that they haven't had a chance, or things haven't broken right for them. You know what I'm saying? And therefore, that's why they're in the condition they are. Well, just as a side story, when I was 11 years old, my dad died. My mom went out and took the little bit of insurance money, and she bought rent houses. And so I became the construction dude at 11 years old. When she had a problem with one of the houses that was simple, I did it. If it was busy or hard, she would go hire a contractor, and she'd say, now you're not going to hire somebody to be your helper. There's your helper over there. He's free. And so since about the age of 11, I've been involved in some form of construction work. I got a lot of funny stories about those, but all through my ministry, and this is another thing that's kind of strange for me. I've always been a bivocational pastor. I've always done something other than just pastor. I think it helped me versus hurt me. And here's why. Because if you keep your foot in the water or your toe in the water, you know the temperature of it. You know, one of the things that I see pastors do more than anything else is as their churches grow in size, they find themselves more and more removed. There's a small group of people around them that isolate them from the greater body. And what happens is you grow cold, you grow where you're hearing those chirps in your ear about how wonderful you are. It's kind of like when Roman emperors came in after a great conquest, they had somebody chirping in their ear on the chariot with them, how great they are and how wonderful they are and how powerful they were. And you know, you hear that a lot, you get used to it. But when you keep your toe dipped in the world, it gives you a different perspective of what your congregation is going through. It gives you fodder, it gives you understanding, it gives you sermon information. It makes you part of them instead of them looking at you and saying, I can never be like that. You know,
Right.
you know, sports and all. So anyway, I always did that. So when I moved out here, I just did what I've always done. You know, I've told people all my life that you could take me and blindfold me and parachute me out of a plane anywhere. And within a month, I'd have a place to live, a job, and things would be going fine. And so I just started doing what I knew. And so I have a construction company now that does, I have one crew that does hardscapes, fire pits, outdoor kitchens, outdoor structures, et cetera, et cetera. And I have another crew where we do remodeling, we flip houses, we do those kind of things. So that's what I've been doing since 2008.
So I know you well enough to know that that you have clean hands as well as a pure heart. I'm obviously using the language of the Psalms, but I'm going to ask you a very pointed question because I think it really pertains to the things that many of our listeners have to deal with. I would say in terms of the real estate world, Texas has a bit of a checkered reputation. I have some history in that area, and I know some lawyers who work in that field, and they themselves say that Texas real estate is a gunslinger's arena. And then beyond that, construction, I'd say almost from time immemorial, has a rather checkered reputation. People padding bills of lading, maybe overcharging for labor, blah, 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 blah. Just goes on and on. And I'm not trying to throw Texas under the bus. I'm certainly not trying to throw you under the bus. But I do want to ask this question. How do you keep your hands clean as a man who fears God and loves him in a very competitive environment where you have probably every incentive and maybe a few that you didn't even want pushing you, as it were, to pad those bills of lading or to charge more for the labor or whatever it might be? How do you survive and thrive in an environment like that and still keep God front and center and fully honored? I think that's a really important question for a lot of our listeners because they have jobs in competitive industries too. And a lot of believers end up in one way or another compromising their own testimony and their own life with God because they don't stay clean. So go ahead, take it away on that one.
Okay, well, the first thing about that is you've got to take the G out of your vocabulary or out of your alphabet. Okay, that there's the big word. The G letter is the letter that we need to all stay away from. Greed.
Okay.
Because everything that you read, everything that you see, everything that you hear in the world structure is what my mama used to say. She'd say, Dane, I'm going to get all I can, put it in the can, and then I'm going to sit on the can. So, you know, she was a person who believed in that. So I understand the concept. So the first thing is you've got to, in your life, you have to deal with the G letter. You have to deal with the whispers in your ears. And as you well know, teaching spiritual warfare, I started to call you Blaine. Lord have mercy. You'll take that, won't you?
I will. That's a compliment.
You know, teaching spiritual warfare, we realize that the devil is not overt. He's covert. He's the whisper in your ear.
Mhm.
He's the jab in your ribs. He's the complaint in where you say, they're mistreating me. You know, that whole concept of what I refer to as the hurting spirit, where it enters into somebody and just gnaws at them on the inside till they become so infected that they are infectious to others. And if you've pastored more than 10 minutes, you've met a hurting spirit. They have a whine factor in them that's beyond belief, and they recruit people to whine with them. You can take two hurting spirits that come into a congregation not knowing each other. Within 5 minutes, they're best buddies, they're friends. And they have a concept of the wounded spirit all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens is if we get rid of the G in our vocabulary, then we can do this. And testimony to this is I have not advertised, nor have I bid on a job in the last 4 or 5 years. All the business I receive is by word of mouth. One of my customers telling another customer that this person will treat you fairly, he will price you fairly, and he will do his work with quality. You know, I tell my crews all the time, we have to be particular. We have to do it was our home or it was our backyard. You know, I get mad at them if they drop a cigarette butt on the ground or if they leave a can or a piece of trash, because people rely on us. Every time a customer will refer a friend, I'll go to them, and the first thing I say is I'm gonna make you 2 promises, and that is that I'm not going to be the cheapest, nor do I want to be. But the second promise makes the first one okay, and that is I warrant my work, period. And when you call me, I'll be here, no matter what. And so every time I say that where I'm working, they go, enough said. And so I don't have to do this. If somebody calls me and says, I got your name off Google or internet or whatever it is, I'd like you to bid on a job. I just tell them, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. And I stay booked up 6, 7, 8 months in advance. And people just say, put me on the list. And the reason is because I was talking to a customer the other day, and I was trying to talk them out of doing something. I was talking about something they were doing that would have made me a lot of money. And I said, you don't need to do that. You really don't need to do that. And say, what? And they said to me, why are you trying to talk me out of this? And I said, because I'm more concerned about your money than you are. Okay? That's that ugly thing of scripture. If we were more concerned about the person we were working for than what the benefit is for us, we'd never go hungry. The basket would never be empty. There would always be bread. Because
I hope our listeners are paying attention, because this is solid gold, what you're saying. Keep going.
Okay. So what I'm saying is, Ken, if we have that spirit that says, I am more concerned about my fellow man than I am with me, God will take care of me. And if I walk the walk, I talk, everything will be fine. I promise you, it will be fine. To be real honest with you, I'm as in good a place as I've ever been in my life, and it's simply because I try my best. Now, please understand, I have feet of clay, and I fail just like everybody else. And I catch myself sometimes, and I cry about it sometimes, and sometimes I laugh about it. But the point is, I try every day. Every day, the first thing I say in the morning is, what are we doing today, Lord? And the last thing I say at night is, Lord, forgive me for the things I didn't do. Now, if you start and finish like that, every day is a new day, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a new beginning. That's where I love the scripture that says, he who is faithful to forgive is also faithful to forget. Because every day is a new day. A repentant heart already starts clean every single day. Okay, that's my story. I'm sticking with it.
I love it. I love it. You know, as you were saying all that, I just thought of one single line from the Bible. Enoch walked with God, and then he was not, for God took him.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're leaving us yet, but I love that. I mean, what you just defined was walking with God. And, I honestly, I don't think most people hear in a practical, hands-on way, what does it mean to walk with God these days? And I have myself lived by that same principle. And I can remember discussing it with you years ago when we used to, talk more frequently. about how we're supposed to put the needs of others ahead of ourselves. And it can be immensely difficult to do because, of course, we also have to provide for our own families and we have to, pay our own bills and so forth. But at the end of the day, Paul, the apostle, said, each of you should look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. And this is part of what it means to live out, to walk out our Christianity. And in the process, we actually achieve something that is rarely spoken of these days, the crucifixion of the flesh, the self-life. And so, you just defined what that looks like to be a businessman in a very competitive world and still define God's provision coming your way.
And it does. I mean, I am as blessed as any man. I have no needs, zero needs. And we've talked about that before, Ken. It's just we've talked about it as being part of an anointing. And I don't think it is. I think it's part of the Christian experience. Now, that doesn't, and my history well enough, there's been some rough places. I've had some patches. You've had some serious patches in your life. We've had some conversations from, and we always say, just stay the course. Mm-hmm. There's going to be valleys. Mm-hmm. And if there's not valleys, then there's no views on the mountaintops, and there's nothing to compare life with. So we have to believe that God has our best interests at heart. And if he does, then we should have everybody else's best interest at heart, because we're the conduit for that.
So if the last comment told, that one you just said was platinum.
Well, I would like to kind of go back and head in on that idea of the bivocational life and keeping both feet, one foot in the world, so to speak, in a good way, and one foot in the church. I think it's important. It's something I deal with. I know that Ken has been in the however you want to talk about it, in the real world or in the business world, the marketplace, or people in the ministry call the real world the marketplace. Everybody else just calls it the world. But you've been there, and I as well. I've been bivocational this whole time that we started our church, and sounds like, Dane, we have a lot to talk about. I own and run a similar company here in Nashville, and so I think it's important, because was one of the things that I talk through people a lot of times is, man, when they get on fire for God, guess what they want to do? They want to go into full-time ministry, and for them, full-time ministry means being paid for ministering and doing that in some sort of a job role, because they think, because I remember feeling the same way, man, it would be great if I could just spend my life doing exactly this. The greatest parts of my life right now is sharing and talking about Jesus, and that's all I'm doing. And I won't have to put up with all of the mundane office stuff and the boss that's overbearing and the coworkers that are annoying. I could just do all of my stuff for Jesus. But I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that is a big part of ministry, is being in there with the coworkers, with the boss, with the people that you're serving. I mean, that's where most of my pastoring takes place, quite frankly, is with people that don't maybe not go to our church. It's in the context of everyday life. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it sounds exactly right. I had a couple of thoughts while you're sitting there. One of the things that people believe, that because we've been taught that, those that, God, I'm gonna get myself in so much trouble, but those who make a profession out of the church teach that. Where my examples are people like Paul. If I'm not mistaken, every time Paul went to a town, he went into the town square and started making tents. If I'm not mistaken, and he would sit there in the marketplace and make tents and communicate the love of God that way. Last time I checked, until the end of his life, Jesus was a carpenter. One of the things that, I've got this bucket list of things I want to see when I get to heaven. I want to see Jesus's hands, because carpenters' hands are pretty unique, especially during that period. Yeah. They're gnarled and they're hard. Well, people don't think that's what it is, but we've been taught that if you're anointed, if you're educated, if you're a man or a woman of God, then God will protect you and God will give you everything in your needs, your desires, so that you can do that full time. Boys, we're doing it full time every day anyway. I mean, we should be. If we're not, then we're not following God. I mean, it's just it's a non sequitur that people don't understand, that this is not a calling, it's a lifestyle. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you're a believer in Jesus Christ. It doesn't matter whether you're full-time, part-time, or no time. You're still a follower. You know what I'm saying? And so people got to get over themselves. Part of it, I'll be telling you right now, is ego-driven. I will not have arrived until I am full-time, until God has given me the ability to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on somebody else's time. That's just not the way it works. I used to have people all the time. This is the honest to God truth. And, there are certain things that I really wanted bad. I used to dress really well, and I used to drive a really nice car. And I had people in my congregation say, how come the pastor's driving that car? Why does he dress so nice? And somebody that knew me would say, well, that's because he's a bivocational pastor, because he tells everybody that the church cannot sustain a lifestyle in which he wants to live. So he goes out and does something else. So for years, I had what I would consider 3 full-time jobs. One was the church, was a full-time job. My personal work was a full-time job. And then my family and ministry with John was a full-time job. So I had 3 full-time jobs. There was a lot of times I didn't get a lot of sleep, but I had 3 full-time jobs, and it didn't bother me. And, I'm in great health, and I'm not poor, and, I'm not broken, because I put the things that are important first, and everything else take care of itself.
I think somebody famous said that somewhere. I could be wrong, but you can correct me. I think Jesus himself said, seek first the kingdom and the righteousness of God, and everything you need will be given to you.
He's pretty famous.
He's pretty famous. Yeah. I think he's quoting. So Dane,
now, somebody's going to think I'm sacrilegious for saying stuff like that. But,
no, you're not sacrilegious. What you're doing is you're taking profound spiritual concepts and boiling them down into the language that we talk in today, so that these things are understandable, because so often we get caught up in our Christianese. And when we do that, suddenly it becomes a foreign language, and then nobody really knows what in the world they're supposed to be doing. So you're just boiling it down. And that's actually one of the things I really love about you, is you're a very homespun guy. And, when we started out, you said 2 things that triggered me. So we've kind of explored one of them and a bit more. But the other thing you said was that you are planning to start, I think you said in May, so next month, as we make this recording, you're planning to start some sort of a Bible study for the unchurched in your town or your city. Tell us a little bit about what's driving that, and how do you intend to get these unsaved, unchurched people to come? I mean, I think I know the answer. It's obviously a preloaded question, but nevertheless, why don't you share that with our listeners? Because I think it's a really important point, especially in a time where we need a new reformation in the church, and we need some kind of new awakening move of God, and we need new evangelism.
Well, let me take the last part first.
Okay.
To me, evangelism is like guerrilla warfare. I don't want to stand out here on a soapbox, and I don't want to preach in the marketplace and as the followers go by. I want to go sneak in, grab one, tell them about the love of Jesus, and stealth them out of the door into the kingdom. I can do that. The devil has done such a great job of denouncing and making us look foolish, that we have to figure out a better way to do this. We have to find a way to gather without look like we're crazy. Okay, so start part 1 is you live your life in a way where people can see Jesus in it. Now, it doesn't mean you're preaching at them. And if you did preach at them, they probably wouldn't see Jesus in you. But when you live your life for Jesus, when they can see the light of the kingdom in you, they're attracted to you, just like a moth is to a flame. It's just the way it is. You can't really stop that. It just happens. It's an organic thing that goes on, because every heart is seeking God. I don't care what anybody tells you. Every heart is seeking the truth. Every heart is seeking the kingdom. Every heart is seeking a life beyond their own. So that's the first step. Second step is you live that out by helping them if you can. Now, that doesn't mean you fulfill all their needs, but they know that you're there for them. And the third thing is you just invite them. But it's not just some unique thing. It's just like, for instance, after my wife actually is the one that told me this, and she kind of cried up. I was having one of those, what I want. This is going to sound funny, but I had one of those, what I want to be when I grow up meetings with myself. And she was listening to me talk to myself back and forth. What do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want to do and how do I want to do? And she started crying a little bit. And I said, Renee, what are you crying about? And she said 2 words, Bible study. She said, Bible study. And I said, do you think anybody would come? And she said, I have 50 people that would come in a heartbeat. You said you would do it. And I said, really? And so I went to work the next day, and all my crews were working on a project. We're really in the middle of something. We have 2 deadlines by May the 1st. We got to get finished. One of them's a completely remodel. So we were all kind of dancing around that, running around. And I said, I'm thinking about starting a Bible study. And I heard from the other room, one of the guys said, well, I'm coming. And then another one said, well, I'm coming too. When's it going to be? And so it's not like you have to go, if it's a God thing, this way. Let me put it a whole different way. If it's a God thing, you'll have that response. If you have to go twist people's arms to come, it's not a God thing, it's a you thing. You see the difference?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Am I making sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so the seed, I guess what I'm basically saying is the seed I've sown over the last 8 years, because I used to teach a Bible study, and then I quit for a while. I've quit for a while. And so the seeds I've already sown will come back to life if I just water them a little bit. So that's basically what I'm doing. I'm gonna water what I've already planted seeds in. That's what a Bible study is to me. It'll just be to take the principles that we're all trying to strive to live to and put them in a practical form so that they can relate to it. I was teaching a Bible study, and these 2 guys were talking in the scripture where Jesus said you have to forgive them 100 times. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
And the guy, this guy said, well, I've already forgiven that guy 100 times, so that means I can do anything I want. And I said, no, you don't understand. The word there that he's saying is infinity. You have to constantly, continuous, forever forgive them. And he went, oh man, are you telling me I really have to? I said, yeah, because that's the love of Jesus. And so those are the things that we need to explain, because he had been taught in church, I have to forgive him 100 times, and after that, all bets are off. I can do anything I want to. I slap him if I want to. But he didn't understand it in the Greek form. It means infinity, forever. You have to do it. So that's what I want to do with the Bible study. I don't want to make them educated Bible people. I want them to have the tools in their belt to live their lives every day. I mean, it's hard out there. Mm-hmm. I don't care what anybody tells you. It's hard out there. Mm-hmm. If we're not educating them and equipping them to work day to day, we have failed miserably. And that's my burden, is I think for a lot of different reasons, we get caught up in teaching social ethics and not what am I. Early on in the vineyard, a great I wouldn't call him an evangelist, a missionary. We're sitting in the green room talking at one of the conferences, and he started telling a story about himself. That when he was in Africa, he went to a village and he sat down with them and he started teaching. And then at first, all of them were coming, And the reason was because it was odd. It was something new. It was fresh. And then over a period of time, day by day, they quit coming. And so it finally was hardly anybody coming. So the missionary went to the chief and said, why are the people not coming? And the chief tried to be polite, and he was saying, it's busy, it's hunting season, it's this, it's that, it's crops, it's, give him all the excuses he could. And he said, no, I want to know why they're not coming, because I'm teaching the word of God. And I guess the chief just got all he could stand. And he looked him square in the eyes and he said, well, it's because it's not helping them with the demons that plague them all night long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And he tucked his tail and went home, because he understood that he was ill-equipped to do what he was trying to do. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. There's a lot of teaching out there that is ill-equipped to keep them from the demons that plague them all night long.
Whether real or what I call New York Times demons, that stuff that's in their head or in their heart, either way.
It doesn't matter. I don't care if it's the whisper in your ear or the grappling in your heart. The demons you fight or the demons you think you fight. It's still a demon.
That's right.
The whispers to me are as tough as when somebody, I was in Brisbane, Australia one time, and this youth pastor came up, and it so happened that John had asked me to take a team from Anaheim, a youth team to minister with us. And so when this youth pastor come up, I thought, well, this is a great. So I asked this youth team to come up and say, we're going to minister to this guy. And I said, what's going on? And he said, well, I have these anger issues and I can't deal with them, and I don't know how to get rid of them. And if I'm going to do what I'm able to want to do, then I'm going to have to deal with this horrific anger that comes up in me. And I said, okay, so let's pray. So I said, come, Holy Spirit. Boom. He hits the floor. He arcs in where his head is on the floor and his heels are on the floor. He's arced up like that. And he's wearing a big t-shirt. He's a big, heavy-set guy. And his t-shirt comes up. And we start seeing bite marks coming from the inside. Bite marks start forming all over his belly. And in pure California style, they went, whoa, dude, look at this, And so I understand that concept. Been there, done that. But the whispers are just as bad. They just keep you just off center. They don't move you way into that where you're afflicted, but it keeps you so far off center that whispers in your ears. And that's what you're talking about, the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
That whisper in your ears or that comment that keeps you just off kilter just enough that you can't fulfill your destiny in the kingdom.
That's right. That's right. Awesome story. So, you going back to this Bible study you're going to start, Jesus said it's out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaks. Well, you're going to be doing some amount of speaking because you'll be leading a Bible study. But, I think there's even a more foundational thing than that going on for you. And that is, between you and Renee, what you have certainty of is that it's out of the overflow of the lives that you lead, the integrity that you have, the character that you're known for in the community, the business ethics we already spoke about. It's out of all of that people are like, whatever that Dane Yarbrough has to say, I think I want to hear that. And I think I want some of it. And so that's what's giving you confidence in this endeavor you're going to undertake. I mean, who knows what this Bible study will turn into, but you don't live in a large city. It's conceivable that maybe many people will be drawn to this thing over time, and it may have a significant impact on your little piece of Texas.
Well, I hope so. And I would love to do that. And I would love to install a young whippersnapper pastor and just coach him. I'd love to do that, but that's not my intent. It's kind of like when John said, you go get the puppies and I'll give you the papers. I mean, I don't go in this with any intention other than helping people live their day-to-day lives. That's really all I care about.
Well,
and
go ahead. Go on.
I was going to say, if I've done that, I've done my job. Bring kingdom servants to a place where they can live a kingdom life day to day. I've done my job. I don't have to have anything else.
That's right.
I know, Ken. I've done enough and seen enough in my life. I'm full. I on my walls back there, like I'm pointing right there. Those are those 2 letters that John wrote to me, giving me permission to do what I want. I've got Aboriginals over there where I'm out in the outback ministering to them. I got pictures of 3 kids right over there. One was dead when I prayed for him, and now he's alive. One was blind, and now he sees. Another one, a man came up, and as he walked up the aisle to talk to me, in a break, the Lord said, "Don't you let him talk you into aborting his grandchild," because his daughter had become pregnant without a husband. And so he was about halfway down. I said, "Don't you come up here expecting me to give you permission to abort your grandchild." He just fell into the hole in the ground in a hump. And so I got a picture of that grandbaby that was born. So, I've seen enough in my life. I've done enough in my life. I'm full. But if I can one more time help people to overcome the world in their day-to-day life and live the life they're supposed to, I'm all in.
One of the things John used to say years ago is that for most people, our lives are the only Bible they will ever read.
Correct.
And so what you're really saying is your life has become a form of the Bible for people to read. And as another friend of mine likes to say, you've put Jesus on display. And so people are seeing that. But, you also made an amazing comment there a moment ago. You talked about a dead person who came back to life, a blind person who saw, and a baby that was rescued. So there's a straight line continuum that goes through those 3 stories, and they're all in one picture frame of 2 miracles, what many would call miracles, and maybe something that's more in the realm of social action and social justice. So I think what you're describing is what, can we call it, an authentic or integrated or normal Christian life looks like. Do you want to make any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, last time we talked, I told you about the normal Christian life, and that was the roofer friend in Houston. I mean, he was just fearless. It's those intuitive things that God speaks to us that we say without window dressing, without trying to shave the edges off so that we don't look foolish. You know the deal. I'm a fool for Christ. Whose fool are you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're going to be somebody's fool. I just soon be, if I'm going to be a fool, I'd like to be a fool for Christ, because, the day is of one period of time where, I prayed that God would come visit me. Now, everybody listening to my voice, if you're a true believer and you're full of the Spirit, be careful what you pray, because it'll come upon you. And so I remember one time I was praying and I was praying, Lord, I would like to have a visitation. I'd really like to have one of those moments. It was during a period of time where everybody was having, and I said, I'd like to have a visitation. Well, he did. And I didn't sleep for 21 days. Now I'm going to tell you, I went from excited, telling everybody how great this was. By the end of 21 days, I wanted to die. I'm just telling you right now. I was saying, come take me, Lord. Because, sleep deprivation is beyond all comprehension. And during that period of time, there was a revelation. Matter of fact, the manuscript I sent you, Ken, on creating the boundaries of your own wilderness, it came out of that experience. Because every week, the Lord, after this 21 days, he said, I saw a throne room event, and Jesus was up on the throne, and he opened the book of life and to my name, and I was standing there, and all I could do is go, because he said, Dane, there's some things we need to talk about. And then he shut the book, and I woke up. Okay. And that experience created this. And he said, now that I had, this is exactly what he said to me. He said, Dane, now that I have your attention, I'm gone 21 days without sleep. And he showed me this throne. I'm terrified because he's open to my face. He said, now that I have your attention, every week I'm going to give you one word, and I want you to preach on that word. Everything that goes on in the church for that week is from that word. And so through that experience, I learned that God has a very defined ecosystem that he wants us to live in. Mm-hmm. He has an idea of the things that he wants us to see us live in and through and over and beyond, so that we can do the things that we need to do. And so my suggestion to everybody is that you quit trying to fulfill somebody else's ministry and seek out what your ministry is and what God's calling you to. You know, we go through the list of all the gifts of the Spirit. I have never met anybody in my life that wanted helps. You know what I mean? So that's my point. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it right there.
I love that. Grant, you were looking a moment ago like you wanted to say something. Do you want to jump in and ask a question?
Well, yeah, I'm just curious to help us put into framework, you know, everything that you're talking about, from you know, the roofer in Houston, to everyday life, to treating people fairly, to raising the dead, encompassing all of that into this idea of a normal Christian life, which I think some would call like this idea of holiness, sanctification, just something other than, because that's a different way of living, right? That's completely different, full spectrum.
No, Grant, it's not different. It's normal.
Well, it's normal it's normal for
you. No, it's normal for you. It's normal for Ken. It's normal for anybody that remember, Jesus through John said, all my kids can play in my kingdom.
Right. But what I'm saying is that that's completely different than what other people, non-believers, live, from doing business fairly without greed to raising the dead. That full spectrum, all of that is completely different. And I'm curious in what you think, because of the way that we have segmented, going back to the other thing that I was talking about with the bivocational, because of the way that we've sort of placed everything in its own little box, and we've separated the sacred and the secular, and we've done all of those things. Do you think that could be a reason why we don't see that sort of a holistic lifestyle in the church nowadays? That it seems what you've described, even though I would agree and Kim would agree, that's the normal Christian life, seems very abnormal, and it's very different than what most people live. And I'm curious to know why you think that is.
Because we get educated out of it. Let me go back to a premise that I have. One time I studied the inception of all major denominational groups, whether it be Baptist, Methodist, Episcopalians. It doesn't matter which group. And if you go back and you study their roots, you'll find every single one of them started off as charismatics. Every single one of them. Not one of them was that was then and this is now. My favorite story of all of them, well, I have two favorite stories, but I'm going to tell you my favorite story. And that was a man named John Knox. And John Knox was off evangelizing, and while he was gone, his son-in-law died. And so when he came back, was the custom of the day, they had the body in the living room and they were mourning, correct? Well, John Knox said, I want to be in there with him. So he shut all the doors, locked them, nailed them shut. And for 3 days, as the story goes, John Knox wailed and prayed for God. At the end of 3 days, the wailing stopped. Now, this is an Episcopalian. Okay. Wasn't John Knox an Episcopalian? Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I muted out. I think he's Scott Presbyterian, but
Presbyterian.
Church for sure.
Presbyterian. That's right. He was a Presbyterian in Scotland. Anyway, make a long story short, at the end of 3 days, the screaming stopped. They thought, he's dead. He's been infected and he's dead. So they broke in, and there was John Knox and his son-in-law sitting at the kitchen table eating breakfast. Okay. Now that's the beginning. John Wesley's horse was lame. He got off and prayed for his horse, and it was no longer lame. 3 ladies came in and prayed for him because he was dying of a fever, and he got up and preached for 3 days.
That's right.
All the great religions of the world began through the power of the Spirit, and then we get caught out of it. And the first thing that happens is us and them. I have the power and you don't. That was the beauty. That was the great message of John. We are all equal. I might have the microphone today, but tomorrow I might not have it anymore. So as long as I have the microphone, I'm going to preach the kingdom. And then when it's somebody else's turn, they'll preach the kingdom. We're all alike. We're all in this kingdom. Just sometimes it passes and we get a little bit better chance, but that doesn't mean you stop being a kingdom. You don't just sit down and say, oh, yeah, aren't they wonderful? Oh, I wish I could be like that. That's not the way this thing works. And that's what, and I apologize if I sound a little aggravated, but I just get sick to death of people telling other people, you just sit there and you watch me do it. I'm the anointed one and you're not.
Yeah.
I had a pastor one time when I was going through my cycle where I thought I was losing my mind. I had a pastor come to me and said, I speak to God and you speak to me. Literally. And I went, wow, what a horrible thing to say to somebody, but that's the controlling mechanism. See, the one thing that I loved about John in the early vineyard more than anything is that everybody wanted to see everybody succeed. It was unbelievable. John had took more pleasure out of watching one of his kids work in the kingdom than he did do it in himself. He much preferred it. I mean, he had such pride in those who he had raised in the kingdom of God. It was unbelievable. It's just unbelievable.
Right.
So and let me get off my soapbox. That's my soapbox issue right there. It just drives me insane.
Well, John embodied that kind of thinking in language like everybody gets to play, or the meat is in the street. I mean, he had a lot of kind of pithy sayings that captured all that. But, oftentimes when I'm speaking today, and John's been gone 23 years, I find myself quoting him over and over and over again because they were so memorable, or they anchored themselves so well into your own soul that they became like guiding posts. And I think that's really kind of where we want to be with all this, is that we don't stray very far from this template that's been given to us.
But see, that you just hit on something so powerful in the things that you talked about. What'd you call me, earthy? What'd you call me earlier?
I don't remember what the word was that I used.
Folksy, maybe, folksy, down home, whatever Yankees say to Southerners to make us feel.
I'm not a Yankee. I don't live up north. I live out west. You're from New Jersey. Come on. I think that's part of the charm of this thing is if we gotta reduce the big words and those kind of things and put it in terms, everyday terms that people can latch on to. They after you, Ken?
Yeah, I'm just putting my computer on Do Not Disturb.
But anyway, I think that one of the great attributes of John, and should be in everybody, is we need to find a way to take the hard things and make them simplistic.
Right.
Put them in a term where somebody can do that. The meat, I'd forgotten about the meat in the street. He used to say that all the time. Letting us know that it's not in here. Don't come in. I remember he'd say, don't come in here to get your blessings, go out there.
That's right. That's exactly what he would say. And, I can just think of so many things that John said that captured this. He used the phrase naturally supernatural. And he took Ephesians 4:11, equipping the saints was the motto that he used at Vineyard Ministries International. And even on all of our conference folders that we used to hand out to people, we used to put, on every one of those conference folders, Ephesians 4:11, equipping the saints. Well, what did John mean by that? We are preparing the saints. We are equipping the saints. We are giving them the tools unto good works of ministry, in order to serve other people and to, to bring about this kind of authentic lifestyle of Christianity. And, I'm going to get on my soapbox here for only a moment, maybe only a moment. But, one of the things that's really on me right now is I'm starting to talk about the new Reformation. Grant and I have discussed it a little bit. We're going to do a couple of podcasts specifically about the new Reformation reasonably soon. And I want to start talking about what is it going to take to change the Western church from kind of a consumer-oriented, observer-oriented, I don't really need to live this. It's enough that I simply believe it. So I call that believism. That kind of orientation to Christianity, where everybody is on the field playing. Everyone's got their position, of course, but everyone's doing something. And everything you've just described of the life that you've built for yourself in East Texas, you left the pastorate, but you never left the ministry. And I think that's a critical distinction. And you're still doing ministry, and you're about to do some more of it, but you're not a pastor anymore. And maybe maybe God will drag you back into the pastorate for a period of time once you retire. But it won't be long. Look at you shaking your head, because you're not trying to do that. You said you want to train a young buck, and I get that. But we have got to get this idea clearly anchored in our minds and hearts that this is how we live. This isn't just something we do for a living.
I'm a gun pick speaks to me a lot in images, and I referred to one last time, and I'm going to refer to it again because it always comes back to me when this subject comes up, and that's the Shawshank Redemption, where the old man was saying, "I wish I could go back and just shake him and tell him what he was doing was wrong." My heart, Ken, is to mentor. That's really what I want to do. I want to take young fire breathers that have all the energy and all the vinegar, and I want to tap them down, but I want to channel them in the right direction. I want to give them good ammunition to shoot, because as you can tell, I have a lot of history. I have a lot of scars on me of the things I did wrong, and I've got a lot of joy in the things I did right. And it's important for people like me to share that wisdom with those who are agile enough to fight the fight hard. You understand what I mean when I say that?
I get it completely. Yeah.
So that's why I say I don't want to be a pastor, because that would tie me down to something that I don't want to be. I want to be a mentor. I'd like to just, be able to talk to people and say, look, don't do it that way. Here's why you don't want to do it that way.
Right.
That's why you want to do it this way. Quit listening to that siren in your ear that's telling you have to do it this way, and it's going to crash you to the rocks. You know what I'm saying?
I get it.
It's everywhere. I mean, I'm stunned. I'm stunned with the G word. I wish if I could just create in everybody's heart the understanding that if we could just take G out of our alphabet and just get rid of that one word, it would change and transitionally the entire church.
Well, effectively, it's been taken out of our vocabulary because almost no one will say I'm greedy or I have a problem with greed. And yet what you're describing is a lifestyle that manifests as greed. And, Paul the Apostle says twice, once in Colossians and once in Ephesians, greed is idolatry. So when we have greed going on, we actually have something in our heart that is displacing God. And with that, we find ourselves, I would say, reduced or rendered ineffective in the life that we've been called to lead. And so we can't live our lives for money. We have to live our lives for a higher calling and for the service of others. Amen. Love God, love your neighbor. Those are the two great commandments. In that order, by the way. Oftentimes today we reverse them and make it love your neighbor and then love God.
Remember John used to say that. He'd say, somebody come up to me and say, I want to get into the deeper things of God. And he would say that. He'd say, well, how you doing with love God with all your mind, heart, and spirit, and loving your neighbor as yourself? How you doing with those two? So, well, I'm not doing very good. Say, well, when you get those two down, come back and I'll give you two more.
He would do that. I heard him say it more than once.
I know. I always got tickled at that. I mean, I've told that story 1,000 times. That's the reality of it. You know, we want to go beyond the main and the plain. That's another one of John's deals.
Yeah.
We want to go beyond the main and the plain. We want to get to the deeper things of God, and we can't even do the main and the plain. We can't even do the simple things. Yeah, we want to get on to the deeper meanings of God. Well, let's get those two down, and we'll go to the next two.
You know, another John Wimber story that I remember is one time there was a guy who was all up in arms because he'd found somebody somewhere and brought him home and given him a bed and fed him for a few days and, you know, cleaned him up, given him some clothes and whatnot. And he called the church and he was all hot and in a lather because he said, you know, the church should be doing something about it. The church should be doing something about it. And John goes, the church is doing something about it. He goes, what's the church doing about it? He goes, you are the church. You're doing something about it. And, you know, one of the things that I find over and over in today's, you know, Christendom, and I'm not sure that it's been that different for the last 40 or 50 years, but for sure it's true now, is a lot of times people want to build some big gigantic program. They want to, you know, build a structure and they want to start up their own foundation or their own whatever 501c3. And it's all because we're going to go out and the church is going to make a difference in this community. And it's like, well, but what are you yourself individually doing? Because the prophet Micah said centuries ago, he has shown you individually, oh man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you individually? That you yourself seek justice and love mercy and walk humbly with your God. Put it into practice wherever you find yourself. If you work in construction, do it in construction. If you work I was in finance, do it in finance. If you work in medicine, do it in medicine. If you work as a janitor, do it as a janitor, but do it yourself. And yet everybody wants to kick it upstairs and roll it off onto the church. And a lot of the, you know, social justice programs and a lot of the, you know, I don't know, I'll just call them alternate gospels that I see emerging on the landscape or that have been around on the landscape for a while. Most of them can be boiled down to that one thing. I don't want the responsibility. I want a program to do it. And we're going to expect the so-called institutional church to take it on.
Yeah, it's so much easier though, Ken. It's so much easier for me to retweet something or to kick $10 to a cause and than actually having to go do it. You know, that takes a lot of work and time and effort.
Well, but see, that's the whole issue of discipleship, isn't it? That we're called to do what Jesus did. And if we're going to be disciples, we have to live as he lived. And so, and this is exactly what we've been talking about. We haven't used the word discipleship up until now, but this is what we've been talking about through this whole podcast is discipleship, living it out in your life every single day.
Well, I remember being at a regional pastors meeting, all kinds of different pastors, different backgrounds. And the speaker asked us, hey, to come help pray for people. So if you've led anyone to the Lord, you know, in the past couple months or so, just raise your hand and come on up here. I was the only one that raised my hand. I felt like an idiot. And so it was me and the dude, because I think they were talking about evangelism or something like that. It's a lot easier to tell other people what to do and to create a system and a program and all of that, as opposed to rolling up your sleeves and doing it yourself. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. What do you think, Dane?
No, you're dead right. Let me tell you a funny story. This conversation popped up one time in a meeting, John. It was a church growth leadership deal setting, and John was talking. He was talking this stuff, what we're talking about. And there's a guy on the front row just disgruntled, and he just kind of chirping. I didn't come here for this. I came to learn how to grow my church. When are we going to start talking about how we grow our church? You know, church. And finally, John had all he could stand of, and he looked down and he said, "Sir, how many more just like you do you want?" And the guy said, "I don't want them like me. I want them like Jesus." So he just said, "Well, then shut up," you know. Let's talk about this thing.
Right.
But see, that's the thing. We want some kind of formula, some kind of program, 10 steps to this, 5 steps to that. You know, if I just take this nuclei material and bring it back to the church, it's going to make my church grow. But the reality is that, how many more just like you do you want? Because I'll promise you, churches always take on the personality of the pastors, period. Period. It's just what it is. So every pastor that's listening to this, if there is any, you have to live under that crucible. How many more do I want just like me?
That's
I think it's a really good place for us to land this. I just want to make one comment as we close. It's just a clarifying comment. Probably 15 minutes back here, Dane made a comment about every religion in the world started as charismatics. I know that there will be some people who will have glommed onto that, and we'll probably get some correspondence about it. So I just want to head all that off at the pass. I know Dane. He can speak for himself, but I'll just vouch for him. This man is committed to Jesus Christ. He is not saying that, Buddhism started as charismatic, or Hinduism or Islam started as charismatic. In old-fashioned circles, when we said religion, all of the founding fathers of America used this language. They meant various denominations of Christianity. And that's what Dane meant. And he's nodding as I'm saying it. But I just want to head off all the incoming email and, posts on our websites about, well, what is that? And, what is this guy, some sort of pantheist, or does he believe that all religions are equally good, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm just shutting it off before it even begins so that we're clear.
Let me, out of my mouth, I'm talking about the creation, the Christian adventure. I'm talking about when men and women, under the tutelage, under the unction, under the teaching of Jesus Christ, all of them started off, every group started off with a power mission. They were all, when I mean charismatic, I just mean, let me put it this way. I'll put it like Zig Ziglar said. He said, I believe in the Bible from Genesis to maps. And that's the kind of, I am full gospel in the sense that if it's written, I believe it's as good today was the day it was written. As I told y'all the story, and I'm going to end with this story, and then you do it. I remember that when I was a believer, that the gifts of the Spirit ended with the laying on of the last apostles' hands. That was our credo. I was challenged to prove that. And in my studies, I was reading in the book of Acts, where Paul was met on the Damascus Road, and a voice in my head said, Dane, who laid hands on Paul? He was functioning under the unction of the Spirit prior to ever meeting one of the apostles.
That's right.
Okay, so that changed my whole worldview about the things of the Spirit. God wants to anoint us today as much as he did the day that he anointed the apostles. He is the same God yesterday and today and forever. That's my story.
I think that's a great place to land it. And, listeners, viewers, we've given you plenty of reasons to cancel us over many of our episodes, but not being Christ-centered won't be one of them. Telling you not to do yoga or keeping biblical sexual ethics, you can cancel us over those. That'll be fine. But I think we're all committed to Christ and what he has for us. So Dane, Ken, this was awesome, and hopefully there'll be a part 3 to this, and we look forward to many more. And Dane, let me know when that application is available to come and pastor your growing movement. I would love to be able to fill that out and send that in to you. Ken, did you want to say something, Kim, before we sign off?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'll throw out a last Wimberism for purposes of closing, because it fits everything we're talking about here. John always said that true disciples are committed to 3 C's. They're committed to Christ, They're committed to his church. That means the visible expression of it, not just watching it online, and to his cause, his purposes in the world. Everything we've been saying here today, in one way or another, has been dancing around that. I just want to bring it to one pithy conclusion. 3 C's: Christ, his church, and his cause. That's what we want everyone who listens to this to be committed to as well, to living it authentically until the end of your days.
Amen.
Well, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to many more of these conversations.